Dr. Herbert Freeden. I understand that your name in Germany was Friedenthal. And you changed your name later. We are in Jerusalem, and the date today is November the 1st, 1981. And we interview, in spite of your writing a book on the subject we will deal with, but I think we have to ask some additional questions in order to clarify some of the issues not dealt in the book. But first of all, I would ask you a question. You didn't deal with the book, and the question is the question of your bio. It would be helpful for the future reader of the interview to know a short bio of you.
Right, yeah. Well, I was born in Posen. At that time, Posen was part of Germany. In 1919, 1 year after the end of the First World War, a Polish army entered Posen. There were street battles. I think it was under the command of General Haller. It was not an ordinary, it was a kind of illegal army. And the Germans had to retreat. And since then it was belonged to Poland. And the German Jews, the Jews in Posen belonged to the German minority. They belonged to the German culture. They spoke German. They went to German schools and universities, and they were disliked by the Polish for two reasons. First of all,
only disliked, also hated.
Probably hated. First of all, because they were Jews, and then they were Germans. So
double reason.
For double reason. So there was a kind of prelude to what happened later in Nazi Germany. In the first few weeks, Jewish men had to leave their houses at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning because it was, I think, if I remember, Naczelna Rada Ludowa, it comes back to me, the Supreme Polish National Council were looking for them in order to arrest them. So I remember my father always left the house early in the morning for a couple of weeks, as long as this action was in force. And of course we had to emigrate, we had to leave Posen. There was no room anymore for German Jews, because they had to opt either for Poland or for Germany. If they had opted for Poland, it would have been very detrimental to both the social and business sphere of my parents, and so we opted for Germany, and that of course meant we had to leave very soon, and we left Posen in March 1920 for Kassel. Kassel is a town in western Germany, between Frankfurt and Hanover. Now it's the seat of a university, and there I went to school. And then I went to the universities in Göttingen, which is very near to Kassel, and studied, first I studied jurisprudence, but I didn't like it and changed into philosophy and went to Munich, Berlin and Leipzig, and made my Dr. Phil. Well, now the second part of the drama starts. First was the emigration from Posen, and then of course Kassel already, the forerunners of the Nazis made themselves felt, but it was a quiet and quite pleasant time in school. In 1933, I was at that time already a work student. That means a student who had to support himself by some work. I was a reporter at the Berlin evening paper 8 Uhr Abendblatt. It belonged to the large publishing enterprise of Rudolf Mosse. And I did all these kind of reportages at home from odd things to theater and behind the scenes of theater and films and so on. Now, just a minute, I have to think. Give me a minute. Well, I remember there was a very interesting evening. The editor of the feuilleton of the 8 Uhr Abendblatt, for whom I worked, called all his staff and voluntary and freelance workers together and had a kind of farewell party. It was a very nostalgic affair. We all knew it was only a question of weeks that the paper would be closed down. It had been closed down temporarily already for a week, for a couple of days. And there was a very strange moment. At that time, everybody thought Moscow would be the great savior of Germany, would save it from the Nazi oppression. And he put on, which was of course at that time forbidden, great risk, he put on the radio, and there was a German broadcast each day from Moscow. And now we heard we sat down, everybody was quiet, and we listened, and then there came, factory so-and-so has already reached the quota. The famous, one of the Eisbrecher Kropotkin, I think, has already reached its aim at the goal in the so-and-so, what it was, I don't know which mission it was. Everything was there, sports and work and party affairs, nothing about Germany, nothing about the Nazis, nothing about what we had to expect. There was such an anticlimax, such a disappointment, such a depression. Everybody was even quieter after the radio has been switched off than during the broadcast. And that was the, how shall I say, it was a very bitter and very an omen for things to come. And this was the last evening where everybody of the 8 Uhr Abendblatt was together, and a few weeks later it was closed down.
33.
Now, 1 year later, or a couple of months later, I had another thing. It was also a very, very dangerous thing at that time, but I wasn't aware of it. I was the theater critic of the Danziger Volksstimme. The Danziger Volksstimme was the party organ of the Social Democrat Party in Danzig. Well, Danzig at that time was an international city. It was governed by a Kommissar of the Völkerbund, of the League of Nations. And while everywhere in Germany the social democratic press had already long ceased to exist, the Danziger Volksstimme, the social democratic party organ in Danzig, continued. And I happened to be the, I wouldn't say correspondent, but for theater and film in Berlin, I was their stringer, their man. So I wrote with Danziger Volksstimme, not being aware of the unpleasant situation. And one day, of course, there was a call, a very strange telephone call, and they asked me whether I was still working for the Ganzer Volksstimme. I said, I don't know why I said so. I said I had stopped working for it a couple of months ago. Are you working for the Weltbühne? The Weltbühne was at that time one of the left-wing, before Hitler, left-wing journals in Germany. Its editor was Karl von Ossietzky.
What is his name?
Ossietzky.
May you spell it?
Ossietzky, O-S-S-I-E-T-Z-K-Y. He was one of the candidates for the Nobel Prize in Peace. He got it, as a matter of fact. He got it, but he was not able to receive it because he was in a concentration camp by then. And Tucholsky was the other editor. Tucholsky. He had left already. Anyhow, unfortunately, I had sent one article to the Weltbühne a couple of months ago before it was banned, before it was closed down. And I said, well, I sent once an article and I had never got a reply. But that was the end of it, of the telephone conversation. I rang up several people who were connected with the Volksbühne. No answer. Everybody already had left, Berlin had left Germany, or either was already in a concentration camp or had fled. I felt it was a very eerie situation. And after an hour approximately, I heard steps coming up the stairs, and the bell rang, and really three men in civilian clothes were standing there, and asked whether I was Herbert Freeden, which I could not deny. And they came in and repeated the whole story again. They had rang me up and started looking through my writing desk and my library. They found things. Look, it's high time that you dispose with these things. But I must say, the search was quite civil. They didn't use any force. Even their way of speech was acceptable and tolerable. And they warned me and left. After I recovered from the shock, nothing more happened. But after a few weeks, then I stopped completely writing for any of these papers, which, for instance, Danzig or anywhere else. And I was then engaged in quite a different field. I took over the cultural department of the Zionist organization in Berlin. Well, I think I need to say anything about the revival, renaissance, reawakening of German Jewry as far as Zionism goes. That has been said.
That we will deal with that in the questions.
Well, I was there.
I interviewed Mr. Shertok, Mr. Tesher.
Yes, Shertok.
And he told me about you and about your work.
Yes, Tesher Shertok, yes. Well, I was there for 2 years, and after 2 years, I was called to take over the, how shall I say, in German, to be the dramaturg of the Reichsverband of the Jewish. Well, just a minute. Switch it off, please. Well, in 1935, I was appointed literary advisor to the Reichsverband der Jüdischen Kulturbünde. This was the countrywide organization of Jewish cultural associations, which performed, which was a theatrical association. That means they had theaters in Berlin, Köln, Hamburg, and also had guest performances in other cities. And apart from theatrical performances, concerts, operas, cabaret, lectures, art exhibitions, etc. I was there till I left Germany. That was till March 1939. Till June 1939.
Rather late, I would say.
I beg your pardon?
Rather late.
Rather late. Rather late. That was just the moment before the last. Yes. Well, it was one of the most dramatic and exciting times which one could imagine. Playing European theater in Nazi Berlin, a theater by Jews, for Jews, so to say. The German public didn't know that such thing existed. They were not allowed to attend. The German press just ignored it. Nobody knew, apart from the Nazis, apart, of course, from our Nazi authorities, to which all our plays, readings, textbooks had to be submitted very well in advance. There was a very strict censorship.
Yes, you mentioned all these things in your book.
Yes, that I don't want to repeat.
You mentioned this in your book, which
Yes.
I would really recommend very much if the future researcher is able to read German, Jüdisches Theater in Nazi Deutschland. A very interesting book. So may I ask you now some questions? And I want to... You considered yourself a Zionist at the same time, and you were also a member of a Zionist organization, I understand.
Right, yeah. Right, yeah.
From this point of departure, I want to ask you many of our questions here. My first question is, later in Theresienstadt, there was created a situation which you yourself tried to describe in German as eine Verflechtung von Spiel und Tod.
Right, yeah.
It's very difficult to translate this in English,
Yes.
but I would say there's a certain kind of attempt to integrate play and death, if I'm right.
Right, yeah.
So my first question is that during the time of the so-called Kulturbund, in the first years of the Kulturbund, 1933, 1935, if you or your friends in college or somebody in the Kulturbund did already feel or realize that such a kind of, let us say, of aim, of goal in the German behavior did exist. Is my question clear? In the Nazi authorities, certainly. If the Jews did realize that this is the real intention of the Nazi authorities.
Well, we have, of course...
No, it's clear.
Yes, it is clear. We have, of course, often asked ourselves why the Nazis permitted it. I mean, I think I also deal with it in this book which you mentioned, my book which you mentioned. I don't think at that time the matter was so, had crystallized to such an extent. The Jewish policy, the Judenpolitik of the Nazis developed very, very slowly, very, very slowly. At that time, 1933, 1934, even 1935, there were several schools of thought how to deal with the Jews. Nobody at that time thought of the final solution, of such a concept, It was a question of forced immigration or encouraged emigration. There was even some people, some Nazis thought of minority rights for the Jews, to exclude them from political and cultural associations or from cultural work, from the cultural body and political body of the German people and have them to say, go on as a separate entity. No, I don't think at that time the, how shall I say, this eerie combination of play and death already was in force. At that time, the Nazis encouraged and permitted the Jewish Kulturbund because, first of all, they wanted to separate German and Jewish culture, German Jewish cultural activities. That was their main preoccupation, because in their mind, the German culture, German literature, German theater, the German press was dominated by Jews, which too is of course an exaggeration, but to some extent the Jewish influence in German literature, theater and press at that time of course was to be felt. I mean before Hitler, there's no doubt about it. And they wanted to exclude the Jews from them, but they had to do something, so to say, to channel their cultural potentialities, and therefore they gave them a field of their own. Jewish cultural activities organized in the Jewish Kulturbund.
My second question deals with internal Jewish problems. How did you really, how did the division, or the divisions, or the clashes within the German Jewry between Zionists and anti-Zionists, Zionists and non-Zionists, the RJF, the Naumann Group, the Schild, the CV from one side, and the Zionist organization in Germany, how was this clash or division felt in the Kulturbund? During the years, let us say, 1933, 1938, and
Right.
I think there's certain kind of development.
Yes.
If you
Definitely.
could
Surely.
tell us about
With
it.
pleasure. All these, how shall I say, the fight for power, whether German Jewry should take a Zionist course or continue the course of the assimilationists, which so far dominated the Jewish scene in Germany. All this was reflected in the Jewish Kulturbund. Shortly after it was established in 1933, it started off as a reserve, so to say, as a reservoir for unemployed Jewish artists, actors, musicians, a kind of social organization. Well, they were dismissed from the German theater, from the German concert halls, from the German artists club. All right, we'll give them some employment. Gradually, but very, I must say, not gradually, it was quite at a quick pace. Of course, the question arose, what are we going to do? How are we going to present ourselves to the Jewish public? It started off with Lessing's Nathan der Weise, Nathan the Wise, which is, of course, one of the great plays of how shall I say, the coexistence between Germans and Jews. A classical example. And then, very, very soon, the question arose, what are we going to do? German the Wise, Nathan the Wise is not typical for us. We have to work out a program for a Jewish audiences which live in Berlin or Hamburg, Köln, never mind, which live in Nazi Germany in times when they have to make up their mind to emigrate, to find their own Jewish existence, at least mental existence. They have been, so to say, thrown out from the German body politic, from the German people. We have to give them a kind of
spiritual refuge, a kind of spiritual existence. So the search began for the repertoire of such a theater. And this in itself was a highly politically motivated idea. Because at that time, 1933 to 1936, even up to 1937 to some extent, there was still the question, can we remain some of our positions in Germany, or have we got to leave? If we remain in Germany, how?
Have we got to separate ourselves completely from German and European culture and to start building up a kind of Jewish culture here in the diaspora, and this kind of ghetto? I mean, although it was not a ghetto in the proper sense of the word. Or is it only a transitory stage of don't know how many years, and anyhow we will have to leave, all of us. And if we have to leave, where to? To Palestine at the time was called, or to the other parts of the free world, especially America. This question divided German Jewry not only in Kulturbund, not only in cultural fields, but altogether. It was reflected in the organizations of the German Jewry, the Reichsvertretung. It was reflected in the Jewish press, at that time still 60 organs of the Jewish press, weeklies, monthlies, etc., were published. And all these consensions and dissensions were reflected in the discussions on the German and on the Jewish Kulturbund, also within the Jewish Kulturbund. But gradually, the idea gained that we have to build up a program which is not only entertaining, is not only, so to say, kind of escapism for the German Jews, to relieve their worries, to relieve them for one evening from their worries and concerns, but to encourage them, to give them something which can help them to maintain their mental and existence in this kind of surroundings. It was very difficult for two reasons. There was no repertoire available. And if it was available, it wasn't permitted by the Nazi authorities. There was a strict censorship. But from time to time, the Kulturbund succeeded in presenting plays which gave the Jewish audience more than just an evening's entertainment. It was Jeremiah's by Stefan Zweig. It was, don't remember at the moment, I'm sorry.
You dealt with it.
I dealt with it, yes. The sources from which the Jewish repertoire was drawn were not very near to the mind of the German Jewish audiences. They didn't respond to the literature of the large and rich literature of Eastern Europe. Peretz, Sholem Aleichem, Mendel Mocha's Freeden were performed with very, very changing success. Peretz, The Golden Chain, was a flop. Mendel Mocha's Freeden, the Travels of Benjamin III, I think it was called, Benjamin III, were a success because it was done in a very, very lively and interesting production. But altogether, it was not the meat which the German Jewish audiences in Berlin were used to eat.
I understand. I want to ask you here 2 or 3 specific questions. In this clash, cultural clash, what was the attitude of the people who continued more or less the ideas of Ludwig Tietz?
Well, Ludwig Tietz unfortunately died very early.
Yes, we know.
He died already in 1933.
Yes, but...
Yes, yes. Well, this is the problem which I try to touch at least. There was a division between strict dogma, let's say, let us, how shall I say, man and maintain the last bastion as long as we can. We stand here and we fall here. This was valid definitely till 1936, but even beyond this. And therefore, we had also the, maybe...
But you wrote about it.
All right, okay.
I really want to know things you didn't write about.
Okay, well, you see, one of the great leading figures in the Kulturbund was Julius Babb. And he was one of the great old men of German theater. He was one of the founders of the Volksbühne. That was a huge organization of trade unionists which had their own theater in Berlin. He was one of the well-known critics and of the Berlin theater. He was, I'm speaking of before Hitler, he wrote a number of books which were classics about Shakespeare and about the German drama. And he, so to say, forged and coined to a large extent, in the first few years, the repertoire of the Jewish Kulturbund. He was completely estranged from Judaism. He was a leading member of the Zentralverein, which was the organization of the assimilationists. And it was very, very difficult for him to find Jewish plays which were up to his literary standard. And I must tell you, it was impossible to find them. Even now, in retrospective, I must say there were none. There were none. The Hebrew theater was non-existent at that time, here and there. We had one play which I tried to adapt for the German stage. Was called The Day of Judgment, about the disturbances, the Arab-Jewish disturbances in 1936. It was performed. It was even a great success, but only by mere chance. I don't know. It must have been one of the few miracles which happened at the time. It was permitted by the censor. But there was no Jewish play which could satisfy the standards and the literary conscience of a man like Julius Babb. It was not just that he was anti-Zionist or not Zionist. He approached the matter not from a Jewish party point of view. He approached theater from the only measurement which he knew. Was it a good play or a bad play?
The question is really, you shouldn't, if you don't want to answer long answers, you do short ones. I understand the singer from your book, yes, was interested very much to freeze the clashes into the Jewish public between Zionists and anti-Zionists, and didn't want to deal very much with this problem. That's right.
Well,
I have this impression.
He tried to reconcile the ideas. He tried to reconcile them.
Yes.
But he tried to reconcile them, of course, from one point of view. The Kulturbund was his idea. By all means, he wanted to go on. He didn't want the Kulturbund be the victim of the dissent between Zionists and anti-Zionists, or al-Zionists or non-Zionists. And therefore, he tried to reconcile the various views. I think that was the actual motive of his activities. In later years, he became, I think, more and more, if I may say the things in quotes, Jewish. You see, he became very much conscious of the situation in which German Jews were then. Because it's quite clear, he was a man who had to deal with the Nazi authorities. Day by day, he had his conversations with the Reichskulturwalter Hinkel. That was a man whom Goebbels had commissioned to be in charge of Jewish cultural activities. And he was very, very much aware. He became, let us say, very much aware of the Jewish situation. And I think he felt that the situation was not just by accident or by incident, and it was not just a passing phase. He knew that there was something fundamental in it, and I think that influenced his views and ideas.
Another question is really, there wasn't a certain time when the Zionists wanted to leave the Kulturbund. And I think that even in the Kulturbund, Schild people were interested the Zionists should leave. Is this right?
Well, I think as far I wouldn't formulate it like this. The question was not of leaving, the question was, if I may use this very, very strong word, conquering the Kulturbund.
Mm-hmm.
The Kulturbund, after all, was a platform which reached the majority, or a large part of German Jews. And it was, of course, very essential for Zionists to make themselves felt there. I don't remember that they ever contemplated leaving the Kulturbund. They wanted to be responsible for its direction. They fought for having a say, an essential say in the Kulturbund, and at the end they succeeded.
Okay, another question is really how much and how long did the people responsible for the Kulturbund think that they are able to conserve, let us say, German Jewish culture? How long did this feeling last? I understand that after some years of the experience becoming bitter more and more, they stopped this intention. But how long did they really try to conserve this kind of the German Jewish culture?
Well, of course, when it started, everybody, even the Western democracies, the whole free world was convinced that Hitler would be just a passing episode. The German Jews were not the only ones who were. So in the beginning, of course, the whole free world was mistaken in taking Hitler and the Nazism as a passing phase. How long can it last? And each time when there was the question of the Rhinelands, the question of the demilitarization of the Rhinelands at that time, it was still the Rhinelands were still under the Versailles Pact, non-militarized. Everybody thought, well, France will, of course, do this, and England will do this. It's just, one gave him a year at most. So the German Jews were in very good company at that time in misjudging the strength and length of Nazism. As long as one thought...
It was an illusion, I understand.
An illusion shared by the whole free world, including the most prominent newspapers in England and America, from the Times to the New York Times. So, of course, and the Jews in Germany could still read these papers. Now, as long as there was a hope that the whole spook would be over, of course they didn't change their attitude. Only gradually it transpired that the end is not yet in sight. And even if there would be an end sometime, the Jews wouldn't be there anymore to see the end. Then there was a gradual change in their attitude towards, so to say, these coexistence with German culture, to find their own roots in Jewish history and Jewish learning, in Jewish culture. And this is also reflected, of course, in the Kulturbund. It is reflected in the Kulturbund. Gradually, apart from entertainment, which had to be, so to say, presented from time to time in order to, you see, because you must must not forget, the German Jews were terribly tired at that time. They were under constant strain and stress. They had to dissolve their economic existence. They had to find a way to get out from Germany. They had to change their professions. They had to learn a new trade. They were tired in the evening, and of course not everybody was able to, just mentally able to get strict education in a way of serious plays or serious lectures. And of course always entertainment had to be, kind of light comedies had to be given. But on the whole, this process of Judaization of German Jews was clearly marked in the program and the repertoire and the activities of the Jewish Kulturbund.
Yes, don't you think that the Kulturbund really supported the trend existing in German Jewry, which you mentioned, that the tempest will pass, that the Nazi regime will not last? And you wrote yourself that Brodnitz said in 1935, the Kulturbund shouldn't be a so-called No-Dach, but a permanent house for German Jews. Yes. It means, and this kind of organization maybe that really supported this kind of trend, that this kind of illusion, that we will find a way out from this.
You're quite right. You see, there was still the possibility in 1935. I mean, one thought, all right, the Jews have been excluded from state functions, from public life as far as the press goes, from theater, from universities. But the economic existence in 1935 was on the whole, still intact. In 1935, Jewish business in Germany still flourished. And
What
Broadness?
excuse me, that's
Yes,
what I
please.
was told by
Pesha.
no, by
Michaelis.
Dolph
Michaelis.
Michaelis. He told me that the German Jews made profit from the German
Yes.
Nazi prosperity.
Yes, of course. Yes, yes. There were still 1935, for instance, when you quoted Broadnitz. The Jews were well off, and there was a following possibility when he said the Kulturbund should not be just an emergency organization, but should be a permanent body. Why? Because, all right, the Jews are not anymore in German theater, not anymore German cultural life, but we have our own. We don't need the German cultural life. We will build up our own cultural sphere, which will satisfy our aspirations. And he didn't say so. And then, anyhow, business was good. And as far as our cultural needs and desires go, we will have the Kulturbund, we can build up the Kulturbund, we can extend the Kulturbund. It's possible to live like this.
And this way, didn't the Kulturbund support trends against migration?
Well, you see,
Go ahead, please.
look, I don't think for a moment that a Jew who went to a play by Ibsen, like I don't know, The Ghosts and so on, I don't think that for a moment he postponed his immigration even for one day.
That you wrote. Kein Jude hat seine Auswanderung